Good evening, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well, having a good Friday. So, this is the final Friday forecast for the end of the year, and tomorrow will be the last weekend forecast. I want to say again, before I get into all of this, thank you guys for an amazing 2022. I'm hoping to make 2023 even better for you guys as we try to expand the channel a little bit further. So, look forward to that. Hopefully I can give you even better content than what I've been giving this year. I feel like it's only just the beginning. That being said, let's address the elephant in the room here, and this is regarding the severe weather threat to start out 2023. As far as the New Year is concerned, not really too much going on. Slight marginal threat for tomorrow, mainly going to be based towards the Gulf Coast, maybe towards southern Georgia where there's a small warm sector, but not really much going there. Slight chance of a brief damaging wind gust or spin up tornado, but nothing major expected. Where we're really concerned, and we'll jump back here, is our day 4 and day 5 time frame, which will be the second and now the third, as we have had a day 5 slight risk now issued. It's pretty good. There's been signs that this day could be a little bit more intense. But I've had a little bit of uncertainty with it. However, I'm not super surprised by this. Now, the second, I've been talking about that day. The third, we're going to have to watch this one too, because I do see signs of potentially severe, maybe even tornadic activity. We're going to have to just hone in on that, which we will in just a minute. Let's first talk about the biggest elephant in the room, which is the second. So this is January 2nd. And we have now an enhanced risk region that's developed here. And this is over towards the Arklatex. We're getting in with cities like Shreveport now involved. Little Rock, you're in this as well. Greenville, Mississippi, you're in there too. I think Tyler's just outside of this marginal risk area. Or not marginal, but enhanced risk area. I don't know how I keep mixing those two up. I guess I want to say moderate? I don't know. Let's not give life to that either, by the way. But there's a lot going on here. There's still some uncertainty with this day, but based off this latest GFS run, I do think that's going to start to change as we're starting to lean a little bit closer towards what I would consider to be more of a discrete storm mode. On my last video when I had talked about this, I had made mention that the Euro was kind of looking at more of a discrete or zonal flow type event, which would lend itself towards discrete supercells, tornadoes, so on and so forth. Whereas the GFS was a little bit more progressive with the system and showing a little bit more of a linear type of mode, which would lend itself towards more of a damaging wind threat. I still think there's room for these areas to kind of expand and shrink. So we'll have to see what ends up happening there, but one thing that can be agreed on is there's almost a certainty that there could be a severe weather episode right around this region here. So let's go ahead and look at day 5 real quick before we get into the models. And this is day 5, if I could lock it in. There we go. But on day 5, that severe weather area has moved off to the east a bit. Now we're starting to get towards Alabama, parts of Georgia included now too, and we're looking at southern Mississippi, parts of south and eastern Louisiana. Unfortunately, we have New Orleans back in the line of fire again. New Orleans got hit by a tornado earlier this month, just before the end of the year, and we're starting with yet another situation where there could be more severe weather, maybe even tornadoes involved yet again. So if you live in this area, we've been through this before, we can get you through it again. Just make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do and being proper and making sure that you're properly prepared. We also have to include areas like Jackson, Baton Rouge in there as well. And then once we get into Birmingham, we're looking at Tuscaloosa, once we get into Alabama, we have Birmingham, Tuscaloosa in there as well, Montgomery, Mobile. We also have to look towards the Gulf Coast too. We can't forget about Gulfport, Mississippi, Gulf Shores, and Mobile. And then once we get into Georgia, we're looking at areas like Columbus in play. Most of the western parts of the state right now. As far as the eastern part, towards Atlanta in particular, it's a little bit of a question mark on you guys, but keep in mind we are 5 days out. This could easily expand over this area or be nothing at all. So we'll just have to watch you guys closely as the day goes on. So just stay tuned. That's the best thing I can tell you right now. Now we'll go towards the models and we'll start making our comparisons here. This is the 12Z Euro. The 18Z is coming out, but I'm not too sure we're going to be in range to really use anything from that tonight. So we're just going to stick with this and work with what we have here. Trend's pretty much held with the Euro. The Euro's been consistent with this storm system just about the entire time. This is heading into the second in the morning of the third, but you can kind of see what's going on here. Here's our storm system back over towards the desert southwest, and this is about 15Z, and you can kind of see based on these little ISO bars here, if when they're tight together like this, there's a lot of upper air forcing, and this will end up causing a lot of thunderstorms, but they'll end up being more linear, and this will probably lean it into more of a damaging wind threat. But over our region over here, these lines are a little bit more spread out. There's also a little bit more robust of a warm sector here too. What this means is there's not going to be quite as much upper air forcing. So these storms won't be in clusters. They'll be a little bit more discrete. And as a result, those more discrete storms can take advantage of the atmosphere here. So basically what we'll end up seeing as a result are storms that can really start to flourish and develop rotating updrafts, and this could also lead to the development of tornadoes, maybe multiple tornadoes. So that's what we have going on there, and we'll move this to 18Z, and then you can see the result of that upper air forcing here. You can see it over towards central Arkansas, even though these aren't going to verify necessarily with the precip models. This is just a general idea of what we could see. And as we move this forward, and this is heading into the third, these storms are going to be lingering about for a bit. And we're going to jump a couple more frames. This is going to be towards 7 a.m. These storms are still going to be lingering, and there's some that are still discrete at this point. So we'll have to watch over towards Mississippi and Alabama in the morning hours. And then watch as the storm system pushes further and further off as this does eventually become linear. And as a result, we'll have to watch further off to the east. Now, as far as the next day after Wednesday, as far as the severe weather threat, there are still some questions here in regards to what we could be dealing with here. There's still an abundant warm sector over here towards the Carolinas and maybe parts of the mid-Atlantic. The question is going to be whether or not the rest of the dynamics make their way this far over. Anywhere a little bit further to the north, say towards Tennessee, Kentucky, towards the Appalachians, you might have a harder time having severe thunderstorms form. I'm thinking you're leaning more towards a heavy rain threat. Of course, I don't want to lean into that too much as of yet because there's still a lot that can change with that. I always try to leave a little bit of a margin of error for situations like this, because this warm sector could easily push a little bit further north or kind of stay further south. So still a lot of variables that are in question here. And this is when we get into the fourth here. Here's our frontal system moving on through, and that'll be the end of our severe threat. Mostly going to be looking at rain for anything that passes through, and then after that a little bit of lingering wind, and that'll be it. So let's make our comparison to the GFS, and this is where things kind of get interesting. Remember how I said before when we watched this storm system begin to come in, we still get that negative tilt. We watched this become a little bit more closed off, but notice now these isobars are a little bit more spread out in comparison to some of the last times we had looked at this. So that I do find that kind of interesting as we move this forward here. Now we're getting some upper level forcing being a little bit more subtle over these regions. As a result, we're seeing a little bit more discrete activity over towards this way, although the window does appear to be a little bit shorter. Eventually, these storms are going to probably go linear at some point, especially as we probably get into the overnight hours. But that's a sign that we aren't. That's one sign that we actually aren't looking for, is the fact that we're starting to develop a window on the GFS where discrete storms could develop. This could become a dangerous situation very quickly if this trend were to hold. And then, of course, with the dynamics in the atmosphere, it wouldn't surprise me to see potential for some nocturnal tornadoes as well, which is another danger all within itself. It doesn't even have to be a strong tornado to be catastrophic in its own right. So we'll have to watch that and see where it goes here. And then we'll also have to watch the following day as we get into Tuesday, and we'll see this line of storm starting to move out. It kind of hangs a little bit further north, but I don't see a lot of potential for severe development towards the Tennessee valleys and the mid-Atlantic, mainly due to the fact that I think the warm sector is not going to be as abundant. That's pretty much what I'm seeing right now, but like I said, I'm going to leave a margin of error for that simply because we don't want this thing to suddenly change up, and at the last second, I'm having to scramble to warn you guys. So I'm watching you guys close, but I'm not super concerned. Pretty much, maybe southern Tennessee is as far north as I think it gets on Tuesday, excuse me. So we'll watch this storm system move out, kind of get an idea of what could be going on with the Carolinas here. There is a small sector that the GFS shows where there could be some potential severe storms, but but it's still pretty hard to say given how far out we are. This is looking about 6 days in advance, honestly. So it's going to be tricky. And that's pretty much all of the model that we're going to look at here, because we're already heading to the 6th, and by that point things will have most likely calmed down. So now we're going to jump back to the Euro here, and we're going to look at a different perspective here. We're going to start to look at more of the low-level jet, so to speak. We're a little bit too far out to actually take a look at the dew points. I don't like to read too far into that or any of the Cape values this far out normally. But one thing that I am getting a feeling of is that these Cape values and this low-level jet are going to be pretty impressive from what I'm seeing here, just based off of how the vorticity map looks. And I think that's going to be a key element in all of this, and this entire potential outbreak here. So I'll run this to about the 2nd, and this is heading into the early morning hours. And this is one thing that I think that has gotten the Storm Prediction Center's attention, so to speak, is the fact that we're already looking early on. This is still 72 hours out. This is 3 days in advance, and we're seeing a low-level jet of 40 knots plus 50 miles an hour at the low levels of the atmosphere. Some places pushing a little closer to 50 exactly by 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. in this region. And as we move this forward, this only intensifies as we get towards the mid-afternoon and heading towards the late evening hours, where storms are going to be at their peak. Right around this time, we're going to be seeing areas where we could be getting up to about 50 plus knots, maybe even 55 knots. Really, in all truth, I'd say 35 to 40 knots is sufficient enough for severe weather and maybe even tornado genesis. So we've definitely met our mark here, and we can even see a secondary maximum that's developed over here towards southern Mississippi. We'll have to watch this area, especially as we get into the overnight hours. And this low-level jet's only going to get stronger because typically that's what the low-level jet does. Once the sun sets, this really starts to intensify and can become the dominant force in generating severe weather. So we're going to watch this for a potential flashpoint overnight. Maybe a few storms could go severe there. And then as we move this forward, we'll have to watch over towards the Ohio Valley even for probably at least a marginal potential for severe weather. Towards the Tennessee Valley and the Mid-Atlantic, we'll watch you as well. But I do think the greatest area of interest is going to be more so towards, I'd say, southern Alabama, southeastern Mississippi, and then maybe parts of North Georgia, maybe even southern Georgia too. But I think the dynamics are going to be greatest earlier in the day. Once the later we get into the day, the quicker these storms are going to probably fizzle out and start to diminish. And then when we look for the dynamics on Wednesday, there is a little bit of something left over, albeit not much, but we'll have to watch towards the Carolinas, of course, too. We'll see what the Storm Prediction Center goes with on Wednesday, but I do think there is potential for something to be there. If we make the comparison on the GFS, for the most part, I'm not going to expect too much dissimilar. Maybe a little bit stronger of a low-level jet because the forcing isn't. I mean, it's still a little bit more prevalent than the Euro, so to speak. So I'm thinking more so with the Euro in particular, it's going to be a little bit weaker. The GFS might have a stronger low-level jet. When we look towards the evening hours of the second and heading into the third, actually we're looking a little bit weaker, which I'm not quite expecting, but there's that increase there, and then this is heading into the third on the morning of. Most of the energy is going to be staying out ahead of this low, but this warm sector isn't going to quite make it that far north. So if you're looking at this in Ohio thinking, oh crap, I might have tornadoes over my area, I don't think so. Don't worry about that. If something does change, of course, I'll let you know. But I think you guys are probably safe, but it's probably going to be windy. I will say that. And then as we go towards 18Z on the third here, the southeast looks like there's something that could be there towards maybe northern Alabama and Georgia. But for the most part, I think the dynamics are going to kind of fall apart here at this point. And there is a little bit of an increased area of low level jet around here on the fourth, but not quite as impressive either. Still going to be some question marks here. A little bit of question marks on the GFS for the third too. So a lot to keep track of there. Let's go ahead and move these both over to the precip and we'll start to get an idea of what we're starting to look at in regards to. Oh boy, I just messed up. But we'll start to get an idea on what our precipitation may look like and what our storm structure could even look like. And I have completely screwed up. Sorry, guys. Well, we'll watch this load up. Thankfully, it loads up pretty quick with this computer. Again, big shout out to my brother here. That's why I'm not having anywhere near as much trouble as I used to. So we're going to run this forward, and this is leaning into that early afternoon time frame. And you can kind of see these little clusters of storms developing here. Of course, this is the 12Z Euro. I do think 18Z could look a little different. But you can kind of see multiple modes here. You can see lines of storms developing here, but you can also see this little boundary here. Almost what looks like, I don't necessarily want to say this could be like a confluence band, but this could be a pocket where this may set up a boundary here for these new showers and storms to form. And these would be the ones that I would have to watch the closest for tornadic potential. We'll watch this eventually go into a linear mode, of course, with the greatest potential for severe weather on the third being a little bit further to the south. And we'll jump this forward. Then eventually this goes linear. We see a little bit of resurgence the following day on Wednesday, and then we'll have to watch this section of the Carolinas in particular as it transitions further east. There's nothing to really worry about there. Also, another thing to note is this does look like it has a decent wintry side on there along with this system. This could end up becoming a named winter storm. I think the greatest potential for wintry weather will be more so towards the Rockies. and maybe the Midwest as well. But most of the wintry weather is going to stay pretty far north. There could be a little swath here over towards Iowa and Minnesota where we could get some pretty hefty snowfall totals. We'll hone in on that probably on New Year's Day. But as for the most part, I'm not too concerned with anything over here. I feel like a lot of these guys are used to that kind of weather. That being said, though, let's go ahead and make our comparison with the GFS. We'll jump to about New Year's Day just to make sure we're covering the snow too. And for the most part, like I said, it's going to be a similar look there. There's a little bit of a change in track in comparison with the GFS. The snow is going to be a little bit further based to the north, mainly looking more towards central Minnesota, Minneapolis involved in this as well. And there's also even some potential for ice. There's a little bit of a little bit of a area of warm air or a battle zone here, where we could see some sleet, maybe even some ice. But even so, despite those little changes there still seems like there's enough forcing to end up making this storm system go linear. A little bit further towards the south, though, there is a sector where there is still potential for discrete storms. But like I said, it's almost like there's a little window right there. It's a shorter time frame than what the Euro is giving. And as a result, the tornado threat might be less with this outcome. Of course, this storm ends up being pretty strong, and we'll see our snow end up heading into the UP of Michigan and northern Wisconsin before heading north of the border. Then, of course, we'll have to watch towards the Carolinas for their severe weather threat. So that's pretty much what we have going on here. A lot to cover, I know, but this is what we do on this channel. We're trying to make sure everybody's covered. We'll hone in on this more on, I would say New Year's Day. I'll have a forecast for you tomorrow morning for New Year's Eve. I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope you guys have a great New Year's Eve and you are safe in doing so. Again, I want to thank you guys for a great 2022. Here's to an even better 2023. Of course, as always, if you liked what I've been doing here, like the video, of course, share the channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. But this has been Metalhead Weatherman. You guys have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow.